Hey everybody, this is GGB. Today we're going to be talking about basketball upsets that can happen on Friday. We'll get to those really quickly because there's an interesting little wrinkle going on there. But let's go over the one upset we got yesterday and how it affected things. We actually had a top 25 upset. It wasn't the one I called. Quite a surprise. I know getting one wrong, it's pretty crazy. But Stanford actually pulled up a rather large upset. Remember, 11-point underdogs on the road against a top 25 team. They hadn't beaten a top 25 team on the road in the past 15 tries. 0-15 in the past. Haven't beaten a team on the road since like 2019 or something when they played Texas on the road. So, again, Stanford hasn't won on the road against a top 25 team in a long time. They ended up beating that streak, and you're looking at it, and you're looking at the Pac-12. I mean, you've got to think there's at least 5 teams there that are March Madness caliber teams. I think you can make if Colorado gets their stuff together, they could definitely make an argument for them there. But if you're looking at, I think UCLA, Arizona, and USC are all locks, right? But I think Stanford and Oregon have legitimate cases to make that they are very good basketball teams and deserve to be in the tournament. But now Stanford, with that win, now they're tied for 4th place with Oregon, and they knocked USC down. So USC is now 2 games behind, basically, UCLA and Arizona, which UCLA sits at 7-1 since they took 1st place in the Pac-12 today. USC sits at 7-3. So again, USC, that loss really put them behind the Bruins and the Wildcats. And you're looking at it, that was a huge helpfulness for Oregon. I know Oregon was kind of like one of those situations. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, like there's a positive for both ways. Like if Stanford loses, you're not going to be tied for 4th place. You'll have 4th place over yourself. Stanford wins, now you're suddenly closer to USC. So I mean, there was no downside for Oregon. Now let's go over why this day is so interesting. Number one, right off the bat, no top 25 teams are playing today. So that's what really makes that normally does not happen. Normally you get a top 25 team every day, right? Today's one of the rare days, but we don't. What's also interesting about today is normally if there's not, I did this once before, I believe. I think it was the National Championship Day. There wasn't a top 25 team playing, but if there's someone from the Power 6 conferences, by the way, I include the top, basically the Power 5 conferences and the Big East, because you got to consider a Big East power conference in basketball, right? But there's no one from those conferences are playing today either. So I gathered all the conferences that are relatively well-known. I mean, I included all the Group of 5 conferences. Normally I do that. Like the next step is I look at the Group of 5 conferences, and there's some other ones I look at, right? I'll also look at the Atlantic 10 a little bit. Missouri Valley's a conference I would definitely take a look at. But right now I narrowed it down to there's about 7 games going on today, about from 3 different conferences. And let's get into it. So at 5 o'clock, we got Wyoming, which is at 15-3, traveling to Air Force, which is at 10-8. Wyoming favored by 7.5 points on nothing, actually. I couldn't find a source where this is going to be played. But at 6 o'clock, we also got Rhode Island, which is at 12-6, traveling to Dayton, which is at 13-7. Dayton favored by 6 points on ESPN2. At 6 o'clock, we had Ohio, which is at 15-3, traveling to Buffalo, which is at 10-7. Buffalo favored by 3.5 points on ESPNU. At 6 o'clock, we had Akron, which is at 13-5, traveling to Toledo, which is at 16-4. Toledo favored by 8 points on CBS Sports Network. 8 o'clock, we had UNLV, which is at 11-9, traveling to Colorado State, which is at 16-1. Colorado State favored by 12.5 points, and they're the biggest favorites of the day. On FS1, 8 o'clock, we had San Jose State, which is at 7-11. Traveling to New Mexico, which is at 7-13. New Mexico favored by 9.5 points. And at 10 o'clock, we got Boise State, which is sitting at 16-4, traveling to Fresno State, which is at 14-5. So we're going to talk about some conferences I don't talk a lot about, mainly because there's no top 25 teams. So let's start with the Mountain West, right? A lot going on in the Mountain West today. If you did not know, Boise State is 1st place in the Mountain West. And you're talking about you're going to have the top 4 teams in the Mountain West all playing today. So a lot of weird, crazy stuff could go on. So right off the bat, let's talk about Wyoming playing Air Force. Wyoming with a win moves to 5-1. And if you do the math, if Colorado State was also to lose their game today, they would have a 75% win percentage. And you look at Wyoming, they would have a 83% win percentage. So if you're Wyoming, hoping obviously for a Colorado State loss today after you watch your Air Force game, which I don't know where you're watching it, but regardless, if Wyoming is to win that game and Colorado State is to lose their game against UNLV, Wyoming moves to second place. With a loss for Wyoming, by the way, and a win for Fresno State over Boise State, Fresno State would move into third place, and Wyoming would move into fourth place. Now, if Fresno State was also to lose their game, Wyoming would stay in. They would stay in third place. I hope that all made sense to you. Air Force, on the other hand, sits at 3-4 in conference. A win would move them to 4-4 in conference, and would move them past Nevada, and they would put themselves in sixth place in the Mountain West, where they presently sit at seventh. Now, a loss for them right now, they're tied for seventh with UNLV. Now, also, another scenario could happen where if Air Force is to pull off the upset against Wyoming, but then UNLV also pulls off the huge upset over Colorado State, UNLV and Air Force will be tied for sixth place. So that's definitely a scenario that could happen today. If Air Force is to lose and UNLV is to win, they will fall down to eighth place. And if Air Force and UNLV both lose, which is the likely scenario today, nothing will change. They will both be sitting at 3-5, which isn't as bad as Utah State's 2-5, right? Moving on, we'll talk about UNLV, Colorado State next. Again, Colorado State with a win could move to 7-1 if Boise State also loses to Fresno State, which is the next game. So obviously, if you're if you're a Colorado State fan, you're going to be watching your team play, and then you're going to be watching and hoping that Fresno State also loses. But Boise State also loses. Boise State also loses and you win, you're suddenly in a tie for first place in the Mountain West. Now, if you are to win, and obviously if Boise State wins, then you're in second place still. With a loss, you fall to 6-2. Worst case scenario, I believe that you could fall behind Wyoming. So I said that earlier. So Wyoming with a win and a Colorado State loss, you would fall behind the Cowboys. UNLV, on the other hand, again, we just went over their scenarios. Same thing as Air Force's scenarios, by the way. Then you got San Jose State, which is at 7-11, China, New Mexico, which is at 7-13. So you look at those two, San Jose State and New Mexico are second to last and last, right? So whoever wins this game is either going to fall to last or move out of last, right? Or stay out of last, right? Because if San Jose State sits at 0-6 in conference, New Mexico sits at 0-7 in conference, so whoever wins this game will get their first conference win. But whoever wins that game is going to move out of, if New Mexico wins, they are suddenly in second to last place. San Jose State falls to last place. Obviously, not a whole lot on the line. These are the two worst teams in the Mountain West, but still rather interesting in my opinion. And then Tech obviously, you get the big game. Boise State traveling to Fresno State. Obviously, as I said before, Boise State with a loss and a Colorado State win would fall to a tie for first place rather than just holding first place outright. Boise State is to win this game. They move to 8-0. They're going to stay in first place. And if Fresno State is to win this game, they move to 5-2, which isn't a big deal unless Wyoming also loses, right? If Wyoming loses and Fresno State wins, then you move to third place if you're Fresno State. If you're Fresno State and you lose, you fall to 4-3. Let me do that math real quick. I don't know if it's better or worse than a 3-2 record. It is worse. So if Fresno State is to lose this game, you fall behind San Diego State. So interesting thing there for San Diego State, if you're an Aztec fan, would likely be rooting for Boise State in this matchup. So that's the Mountain West side of things. We're going to travel on down the road to the Atlantic 10 real quick. So the Atlantic 10, obviously, we were talking about Davidson, I think 2 days ago now, in BCU. This is one of those interesting. We're going to talk about Dayton and Rhode Island. Obviously, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but Dayton with a win, right now Dayton is tied right now for third place with VCU. With a win, they would move to 6-2. That's a 75% win percentage. That's going to be the exact same as George Mason. So it's going to be a little bit interesting. It's going to be a tiebreaker scenario, I believe, with George Mason. So it's going to be kind of interesting, but at the very least, I think you tie for second if you're Dayton and you win this game. Now, if Dayton loses, you fall to 5-3. Now, let me do the math there real quick because, again, you're going to be looking at it. That's a 62.5 win percentage. St. Louis sits at 4-2, which I believe is a 66. So, yeah. If Dayton is to lose this game, they're going to fall to fifth place, out of their tie for third, and St. Louis is going to pass them. So if you're St. Louis, big Rhode Island fan today. Rhode Island with a win would move to 4-3 and enter a tie for seventh place with Richmond. With a loss, they don't move anywhere downwards. They fall to 3-4. Not as bad as St. Joseph's 3-5, but it's definitely giving St. Joseph's some room. So to clear it up for all the Rhode Island, non-Rhode Island and Dayton fans of fans not in the Atlantic 10, right? Because, I mean, like, if you're a Dayton fan, obviously you're going to be rooting for Dayton. If you're a Rhode Island fan, you're obviously going to be rooting for Rhode Island. If you're a St. Louis fan, would love a Rhode Island upset, right? You would pass Dayton. Also, VCU would love a Rhode Island upset, and George Mason would love a Rhode Island upset. Now, Richmond, on the other hand, would love a Dayton win, and St. Joseph's would also love a Dayton win. So that's the Atlantic 10 for you real quick. We're going to travel to the MAC for a little bit, get some action going on. But, yeah. So we got Toledo. We'll start off the back. Akron's playing Toledo, right? This is the number 1 team in Toledo in the conference, which is at 8-1 in conference, and Akron, which sits at 6-2. And if you're not a big MAC fan, today would be the day to watch some MAC basketball, because you're talking about the top 4 teams in the conference are playing each other. So Toledo sits at 8-1. With a loss, they would fall to 8-2, which would be worse than. So if Toledo loses and Ohio wins, Ohio moves to 7-1 in conference. Toledo falls to 8-2, and Ohio, if I believe that math would. Yeah, wait, no, wait, I don't think I did that math right. I did not. Let me do this real quick. Yeah, okay. So if Ohio is to win today over Buffalo, and Toledo is to lose, Ohio takes first place in the MAC. Now, if Toledo's to win, obviously they keep first place. Now, you're looking at the other one, Akron. Akron would love a win. You move to 7-2. If Ohio also loses to Buffalo, so both these teams are going to be watching the Buffalo-Ohio game rather intensely, and both of them are probably going to be rooting for Buffalo in this matchup. But if Akron is to win and Buffalo is also to win, Akron moves to 7-2, Ohio falls to 6-2, Akron moves into second place in the MAC. Now you're looking at the Ohio-Buffalo game, on the other hand. If Ohio is to win, okay, we just went over that. If I was to lose and Akron wins, then Akron moves into that spot. If Buffalo is to win, they move to 5-3, which is still not better than even Akron's 6-3. So Buffalo, no matter if they win today, are not going to move up in the standings. But you would love to make it a little bit closer with Akron and Ohio. If you lose here, though, that's the detriment if you're Buffalo. If you lose here, you fall to 4-4 in conference. Kent State passes you, and you enter a tie for 5th place with Ball State. So that's the downside if you're Buffalo. So what does GGB think of these games? Obviously, I'm not an expert on any of these teams. I've watched some Boise State basketball because I've heard they're relatively good, and I've watched some Dayton basketball because, again, I've heard they're relatively good. But I haven't watched an intense amount, obviously, of San Jose State or New Mexico basketball. I've watched some Colorado State basketball, actually. But if I had to pick an upset, I know you're thinking probably Fresno State over Boise State because that's only a 1 point. Boise State's only a 1 point favorite, but I actually think Boise State's a really good basketball team this year. Not saying Fresno State's not, because I do think they're a solid basketball team. Again, I'm not an avid follower, but I have looked at the stats. I think Fresno State's a solid basketball team. But I got it with Rhode Island, right? Just from my experience watching basketball, I've always thought of Rhode Island as a good basketball team. I always thought of Dayton as a solid basketball team, but I think Rhode Island has a chance here on the road. They're 6-point underdogs, sure, but I really do like the Rams here. I think they're a solid basketball team. I don't think they're killing anyone in the Atlantic 10, but I do think they're capable of pulling off an upset, and that's where I'm going to go with today. But hey, everybody, just GGB saying adios, amigos, and go Rams.